Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dr. Obaid Ruff. I am an editor and guest researcher with Center for Islam and Global Affairs. On behalf of our director, Dr. Sami Al-Arian, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Our topic is a geopolitical earthquake, dissecting the UAE-Israel deal. We have two speakers, Dr. Sami Al-Arian, our director. He received his PhD in computer engineering and was very active in politics and numerous organizations, institutions in the United States in promoting Palestine, relations between Islam and the West, and civil rights. In 2001, Dr. Sami was named by Newsweek as the premier civil rights activist for his efforts to repeal the use of secret evidence in immigration courts. In 2012, Dr. Sami was profiled by historians in the Encyclopedia of American Dissidents as one of only 3 Muslims in the U.S., along with Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, who have been dissidents and prisoners of conscience. His story was featured in 2007 in the award-winning documentary U.S. versus Al-Arian, and in 2016 in the book Being Palestinian. Dr. Sami has written numerous studies and articles focusing on U.S. foreign policy, including a recent book on spirituality, Palestine, and human rights. Conspiring Against Joseph is the title, published in 2004. He's also the author of The Arab Awakening Unveiled, Understanding Transformations and Revolutions in the Middle East, which was published under a pen name. He's also published The United States and Israel from Enabler to Strategic Partner, which is a publication by university here, Istanbul, Zaim University. Our other speaker, Dr. Burhan Koroglu, is head of Department of Philosophy at Ibn Khaldun University and professor of Islamic philosophy also at Ibn Khaldun University. He obtained his bachelor's in philosophy here in Istanbul University and his master's in philosophy at University of Jordan and his PhD back here in Istanbul from Marmara University. He's taught Islamic philosophy and religion courses both in Turkey and also the United States, and has also served as president of civilization studies at Bahçeşehir University. Dr. Buhor's research and interest are Islamic philosophy, religion, ethics, metaphysics, and Middle Eastern politics. He's published many articles in academic journals in Turkish, Arabic, and English. He's translated numerous books between Arabic, English, and Turkish. And lastly, he is a senior analyst at TRT Arabic TV channel. Thank you, Dr. Sami, and thank you, Dr. Burhan, for your time this evening. Dr. Burhan, we'd like to start with you regarding this deal between UAE and Israel, and if you can focus specifically on relations between Turkey and both of these countries. How is this going to impact the region, this deal between Turkey and UAE and Israel? Thank you, Doctor. The time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome to everybody who is listening or watching this program. And thank you, Dr. Sami, for inviting me to this very good program. Actually, I'm honored to be here with you. First of all, I just would like to give a background of the Turkish, in general, Turkish-Arab relations, and in particular, Turkish relations with United Arab Emirates. Actually, of course, everybody knows that Turkey was and still a very important part of Middle Eastern, politics, community, history, whatever. So, but of course, after the First World War, because of, let's say, the crisis that Turkish leaders lived at that time, Turkey stayed a little bit away from the Middle Eastern area and try to be a part of the Western, let's say, world. Of course, it was that the crisis, that even the challenge that was a lot of Muslim countries living at that time. But because of the modernization period and because of the wars and whatever, Turkey take this step to become part of the European world. But of course, because of the historical and intellectual or even strategic, let's say, issues, Turkey stayed a very important part of Middle East, even in that period of a kind of trying to leave the problems of the Middle East. But especially after the 50s and 60s, of course, Turkish existence started coming back again to the scene in the Middle East. So if we come to, let's say, to the modern times, especially after 2001, after the AKP had power and the Turkish politics, of course, a kind of a continuation of another Rafah party, which is maybe giving importance to the traditional values and also ties with the Middle East. Turkey started to go forward to deepen its relations with the region, especially with the Arab countries and Muslim countries. For that reason, there was a kind of let's say honeymoon of the Turkish-Arab relations. There was good relationships between countries, leaderships, and also, of course, very naturally with the nations. But when we come to the Arab Spring in, let's say, 2010, Turkey started feeling that what it achieved through all the struggle with the dictatorships in Turkey and a lot of coups in Turkey, and Turkey started to gain or establish a kind of democracy which is in peace with Islam. So Turkey, most of the authorities and intellectuals, even not just in Turkey but also in the Arab world, explain this issue of Arab Spring, part of a very close, let's say, friendship between Turkey and the Arab world. So Turkish leaders supported this issue because they believe that more democracy and more human rights will bring to the Arab world what they deserve, especially the Arab nations, to deserve of less prestigious life, and also democracy, human rights, and stable economic system, and honor of relations with the other part of the world. But of course, from this time, we start to see that there are some states, they didn't want this, not just in the Muslim world, even in the Western world. So they started to support anything can be an obstacle in front of the Arab Spring. So we started seeing Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates supporting, for example, Egyptian, let's say, counter-revolution after the Egyptian revolution, and of course after that the first maybe free elections that come with Mohammed Morsi. They of course try to, of course, these let's say groups of some Gulf countries try to defeat this democratic wave. And of course, the support of Egyptian Sisi's military coup. After that, of course, the tensions in Libya and every country that has gained some democracy through the Arab Spring, like Yemen, like Syria. All of these countries has been, of course, there was, of course, as I said, some Western intervention. For example, they supported the Western countries. They supported the Sisi. They didn't, at least, they didn't say anything against the Sisi military coup. And Turkey started telling to the Arab world loudly that Turkey is against this kind of anti-democratic movements, and Turkey started criticizing, for example, Sisi's what Sisi did, or his establishment did in Egypt. Also, because of the tensions in their neighborhood, for example, Turkey become a part of the crisis in Syria, and also, for example, most recently the Libyan crisis. What we see in all these movements, that there are some countries, like for example United Arab Emirates, although it is a little bit far from, geographically far from, for example, Libyan scene, they were very active in Libya and in Egypt, supporting the military actions, and in Libya also supporting another military actor, which is Haftar, General Haftar, who made a kind of, let's say, also military action against the legitimate government of Libya. So everywhere we can see this power of course they were Emirates, they were using the power of money, but also they were very active, maybe in cooperation with some Western powers, mostly the United States, to fail these democratic initiatives in the Middle East. From that point, we see Emirates, they are using their also media power to, for example, reduce Turkish, let's say, activity in the region, and using saying that Turkey is supporting, for example, and quota is the Ikhwan Muslimin, or Islamic political Islam in the region. So they were accusing Turkey of supporting, for example, some terrorist organizations like Daesh, for example. Although Turkey has fought and even has sacrificed hundreds of his people, citizens, and bombings and the borders, bombings inside the Turkey, and the cities inside Turkey through Daesh. And Turkey fought in the northern Syria with Daesh from Jarablus to Al-Bab, and a lot of also Turkish soldiers, has been killed by Daesh. They were still going on saying that Turkey is supporting Daesh, Turkey is supporting Islamists, they were using even Western words, Islamic militants, whatever. So this is the issue between Turkey and Emirates. Of course, we know what happened with Saudi Arabia, especially the things related to Khashoggi issue in Turkey. They tried to also reduce Turkish power, just doing their assassination of Khashoggi inside the Turkish borders. So that's the issue between Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Emirates. And also, because of Turkish support to Qatar, while they were, the other Saudi Arabia and Emirates, they just tried to invade Qatar, and Turkey just stood with Qatar against this initiative from Emirates. Also, there was another point that Emirates put Turkey on the target. So if we come to the last stage, maybe we can talk about Libyan issue. While Libya was under the threat of Haftar, who has been supported by Emirates with money, with weapons, with militia from different parts of the people in the world. Turkey just in the end of last year, in December, made an agreement with Libyan government, and of course Turkey intervened by supporting the legitimate government. There was another issue which was made Emirates very angry. But if we come to the issue of Palestine, I don't know how many minutes do I have, but the issue of Palestine, especially we can see from the very beginning of the AKP government in Turkey, Turkey continued supporting Palestine issue. And even at the beginning, when Hamas was in power, a lot of Arab countries and Western powers, they tried to erase Hamas from the Palestinian side, just using the saying that Hamas is a terrorist organization, which is used by Israeli authorities. And we saw within the time that some Arab countries like Egypt, for example, like Saudi Arabia, like Emirates, they were also supporting the idea of this idea, the very same idea. But Turkey stayed in a balance between Palestinian Authority and the Hamas, and of course they supported Hamas because they gained the power through a democratic election. This was another point has been taken in consideration against Turkey by some Arab countries. They were very afraid of any democratic movement in the Arab world. And of course, in the Palestinian issue, we see in every time either Turkish people or Turkish government was always supportive of the Palestinian rights. And anything happens in Palestine, Turkey, Erdogan, and other, of course, Turkish authorities were against the issue, and also they raised a lot of issues to the Security Council, to the United Nations. So this, I think, all of these Turkish movements was a kind of headache in front of the countries. They were they were trying to be in peace with Israel, thinking that if they are in peace with Israel, it will preserve them from any kind of change, regime change in their countries. So we can see, for example, the example of Mohammed bin Salman's deal with Trump recently, and also the latest agreement between a deal between the United Arab Emirates and Israel to normalize the ties. Actually, what we know, they already have these agreements and these, let's say, relations for a long time, either secretly or through some means, especially using the Western countries, including the United States, to normalize the ties between them. Then we saw, by Erdogan, a kind of critical condemnation of this kind of agreement. And they actually, what we understand, that the United Arab Emirates is taking a step to formalize its open and secret relations with Israel. Okay, and of course, we don't expect that the United Arab Emirates will achieve much with this agreement, because it has already received a kind of support through from the United States and Israel for a long time because of their attitude in the Middle East, their opposition to, for example, Hamas, their opposition to Ikhwan Muslimin. So they was all well received and welcomed by the United States and the United Arab Emirates. So, on the other hand, I think this agreement is, I think, a success for Israel at most. I don't think that any success comes to the Arab world or Muslim world through this agreement. They try to kill the Palestinian issue through this agreement, and everybody know that there will be no peace, on this kind of agreement in the Middle East. So Israel will continue occupying Palestine. It will continue killing Palestinians, and unfortunately, there are states like Jordan and Egypt. They cannot, put a very strong position in front of this agreement. So this kind of recognition, of course, will enable Israel to consolidate its legitimacy in the international area, because now there are Arab countries that are supporting Israeli movements, and they don't say anything against Israel. And also, this movement, I think, will encourage other Gulf countries, like Bahrain, for example. I don't know if there are other countries will also add to them, to take similar steps to formalize their relation with Israel. So this is Turkish criticism to United Arab Emirates, not just in the Palestinian issue, but also because of their support of the military coup in Egypt, their support of another military movement in Libya. So we see there is a lot of contradictions between Turkey and United Arab Emirates in the regional issues, and also issues to explain or understand Islam. That's maybe very broadly what I can say, and but I may also say, as a Turkish intellectual, that this kind of attitude will not give any benefit to United Arab Emirates. Maybe their leaders will have some benefit for their personal benefit, but it will not, of course, good for the future of their country in this issue. And that is, I think, what I can say broadly. If there's any questions, I may add to my, speech.
Thank you, Dr. Burhan. No, there's a lot of opinions, a lot of analysts and news agencies talking about this online. A lot of, it's been very political for the last 4 years in the U.S. with the U.S. president has really been leading news stories every day. And so every day is political. Everything is political. There's a lot of political analysis. In light of everybody wanting to be an analyst or an expert on the Middle East after reading one or watching one documentary online, Dr. Burhan, do you see that Jared Kushner played a role in this significantly? Is this something that would have happened with or without him? Where do you see Jared Kushner's role in this deal?
Of course, these two guys, Mohammed bin Salman and Mohammed bin Zayed, they like him very much. I don't know what they find in him, but actually they find a good, let's say, friend who can, offer them good deals. But everybody see in the region that any kind of relationship with Israel and a normalization with Israel will not be in the benefit of any country in the region. So I think Kushner, because of, if we see what happened in the past 2 or 3 years, I think Kushner normally is a part of this deal. But of course they don't need just Kushner. They have other means to make good relations with any Arab, any European or countries, any American side, just if they are ready to betray Islam, Muslim countries, Muslim people. Well, that's what happened in the recent times. Whatever they agreed on, they are all against the benefits of the Muslim countries in the region. So I think Kushner was naturally a part of this process, and maybe there may be other people, and we are going to see in the time who was involved in the region into this agreement. They cannot, hide everything, forever. So I think in the coming times, we are going to see all the details of this kind of agreement and what are the deals, what they are expecting, what they are going to gain. There was a very welcoming, let's say, from the American side. They are very happy, both Republicans and Democrats also. But nobody asks the Palestinian people's opinion. And now we know that they are all, even Fatah and Hamas and everybody is against this issue. So what kind of agreement you make that nobody is happy in the Palestine, and everybody see that this is a kind of betray of the Palestinian issue. They have, of course, sacrificed their lives, their history, whatever, to keep keep in Palestine and from the Arab world, and there is no actually urgent need for this kind of agreement. And so it's very clear that they just want to gain a kind of security for themselves. I mean, the leading families, not for their countries, actually.
Right. Another question, Dr. Burhan. A lot of people are asking what's the common reaction on the streets of the UAE. People there are not able to openly speak against their leadership. It's a monarchy. It's oppressive in some cases. What's the reaction of the typical Emirati on the street? Are they supportive of this deal, or are they aligning themselves with their Palestinian brothers?
Actually, any Arab, any Muslim, even any human being, if they just listen to this, what's happening in Palestine, Israeli occupation, and all this killing and taking the properties and this kind of harm, nobody can say yes to this kind of agreement in the world, not just in Arab countries. So I don't think it is different with the people from the Gulf. They are Muslims. They like their countries. They like their also friends and brothers in Palestine. Of course, we may find some people, some analysts, some, of course, less officials. They may be supportive of this kind of agreement, but I don't think any normal, people from Dubai or from Abu Dhabi, any people can support this kind of, agreement of, selling the Palestinian issue. It's unacceptable, in any means, in my opinion.
Dr. Sami, on behalf of CIGA, again, thank you for joining us as our own director. Time is yours. What's the perspective coming from the Palestinian community in Turkey and abroad in diaspora and back home?
Thank you very much, Obaid, for your generous introduction, and thank you, Dr. Burhan, for being part of this. For over a century, since the advent of the Zionist movement, we have seen a struggle between the Zionists and the indigenous people of Palestine. This conflict rushed in and went into many directions. I don't have time, obviously, to go through the history, but certainly since at least the Nakba, the 1948, when the Palestinians were forced out of their houses, where over 60% of the Palestinians were made into refugees, scattered around the world. There has been a recognition that Israel has become a threat to the order, to the region. And when we talk about the Arab world, we're talking about the impact or the effects of the Sykes-Picot Accord, because most of these Arab provinces were part of the larger empire, a larger political order under the Ottomans. And when they were dismantled, when the Ottoman Empire was dismantled and the Arab world divided into different spheres and different influences of Britain and France and others, there was an attempt by the West to keep this area divided, dismantled, and weak. And part of that was to implant a foreign body in the midst of the Arab world, which was Israel. And of course, that came through many years, through illegal immigration, through the arming of this illegal, illegitimate state, and into the genocidal policies that were adopted by the state, and including, of course, what happened in '48 and subsequently in 1967. And throughout that, the Arab world was in turmoil in different phases. We had basically monarchies in 1948, a sort of a liberal order that was crushed, and they were defeated in 1948. They were never prepared to face this menace. They were never prepared to fight or liberate Palestine. And then that order gradually changed and then became led by more of a socialist, leftist type regimes who were more military dictatorships than anything else, and that order also was defeated soundly in 1967. And then we had a Palestinian national movement that was leading the struggle, and that Palestinian national movement, Israel tried to liquidate it, or at least to strike at it in 1982 in Lebanon. And then throughout that time, we could see that the West was trying to appease Israel. They made Israel into more of a military power in the area in order to establish a sort of a regional hegemony. Israel had different relationship with different regimes and different Western countries. Ultimately, it always had a patron, and of course, since at least 1973, that patron has been the United States, which is basically the most important power, the great power around the world. Now, the US has certain objectives. They have certain strategic imperatives in the Middle East as an international, as a great power, international hegemony. The United States, of course, wants to keep this area under its tutelage, under its influence or control, if you will. It wants to control the oil reserves. This area is the most important strategic oil reserves around the globe, particularly in the Gulf, in the Persian or Arabic Gulf. It wants to protect Israel because Israel is the guarantee that this part of the world will never be united, and it will never become a force to be reckoned with. It wants to sell its military productions as well as other products to be a market for American products and Western products, particularly weapon sales, and it has been selling billions of dollars of weapons to this region by having some sort of different threats. It wants to have military bases by which it can prevent other powers from having a foothold or at least having an influence in this region. So this region has been a hot spot for proxy wars in many instances, particularly during the Cold War, as well as after. It wants to keep its military routes, sea lanes, and airspace open, particularly the Suez Canal. So all these, and of course, it wants whatever movements in this area, in this region, that would like to have independence or would like to have not being allied with any particular power that challenge these powers who are trying to exploit the area and ravish its wealth and resources and so on and so forth. It wants to make sure that these movements, these forces, these powers will never come to power in the first place because they could challenge American hegemony, but at the same time, they want to keep them at bay because they want this area basically to be under their control. Now, to do that, you cannot go through democracy because democracy, and we've seen that in the 2011 Arab Spring movements, democracy is going to bring forces that may not be to the liking of the United States and Israel. And in many instances, they will actually challenge the control of the US and Israel in the region, and that could basically undermine the objectives of the United States. So it is in the interest of American decision makers, unfortunately, not to allow democracy to take hold. But the Americans also cannot go directly against the presence and existence of these democratic forces that have swept the area in 2011, 2012. So even though the American rhetoric and American liberal democracy says that they must or should support democratic forces, free elections, freedom of speech, human rights, rule of law, all these ideals that they called for. But when it came to the moment of truth, we always found that what is the narrow national interest defined by special interest people always carried the day. We saw in 1953 the American coup against Mossadegh in Iran. We saw the successive support of different authoritarian regimes and monarchies and dictatorships throughout the region, throughout the years, under the rubric of being pro-Soviet, or in the context of the Cold War. We've seen them, what they did in Algeria, even after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the Cold War, when they didn't say a word about the crackdown when Islamic parties won the elections, and then they were subsequently canceled by the military regime in Algeria. We saw how they reacted when Hamas won the elections in 2006. So it is not a strange thing that what the rhetoric does not match the actions of the West, that the West has always supported autocratic, authoritarian dictatorships in the Middle East, in the Arab world, in order to secure what they perceive to be their interests. And Israel also, as America wants to become the international hegemon and prevent any other forces or countries from becoming strong and from becoming assertive in their own countries, Israel also wants to become the regional hegemon. And to become a regional hegemon, that means Israel has to, after it had occupied Palestine, repressed its people, exiled the majority of them, has been occupying them for decades. It wants also to establish its own hegemon around the region. So the 2011 Arab Spring revolutionary movements were a threat to this order. Add to that we have in the Arab world monarchies. We have dictators who control a vast amount of wealth in the Arab world, particularly the Gulf countries. And even though these are very minority in terms of numbers, they control literally hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars of actual wealth. And they saw in the Arab Spring movements and the movement towards democracy and representation and freedom and open societies and transparency a threat to that order. This minority clique that has been controlling the destiny of the Arab world was in retreat. It started in Tunisia, then it went into Egypt, and then it went, into Yemen and Libya and other places. And those autocrats, those dictators, saw that this might one day come to them and threaten that order in which they control the destiny of tens of millions. So they became part and parcel of the counter-revolutionary forces, counter-revolutionary order, in order to roll back the gains that the people were asking, the people were demanding, the people were gaining and getting. And they couldn't find a better partner in this, like Israel. And this is very unfortunate, because Israel, that calls itself the only democracy in the Middle East. In fact, it's not democracy at all, because you have over half of the population in the historical land of Palestine who are denied completely any kind of rights, political or otherwise. And it's at best could be called Jewish democracy, even though even within that Jewish context, there are many who have been denied even the same rights as the Ashkenazi Jews, for instance. But putting that aside, Israel wants to have this region weak and fragmented, because this is the only way it can control it. And I'm not making this up. There is an actual plan called the Oded Union Plan that was exposed. It was written in '82. It was translated and much exposed in 1998, in which it calls for exactly this. It calls for the Arab world to be further fragmented, and it allies itself with the minorities within the Arab world, so that it can keep them weak and divided. It was the one that pushing for a Kurdish state. It was the one who pushed for the dismembering and division of Sudan. It has been aiding and abetting all the different minority groups in order to saw division within Muslim and Middle Eastern societies, so that it can control it. So those regimes have found in Israel the perfect partner that can allow them to maintain that order by cracking down on any democratic movement, whether it is Islamic or not, it doesn't matter. And we can see that, you know, in some of these countries in which democracy and freedom movements have been cracked down, that those who are in prison, they come from all sorts of political backgrounds. And that is the issue. The issue here is democratization is not being allowed by force against the people. And the United Arab Emirates and other monarchies and other orders, and like some of these are Gulf countries. We've seen that with Saudi Arabia, with Bahrain, as well others. They have decided to be against the wave of the democratization and the movement towards people power, and they have been cracking down, and they have been aligning themselves. So what we have here is an alliance. It's more than normalization, because when we talk about normalization, we have to go back and see what was the choice within the Arabs have made after the 1973 war. After the 1973 war, Egypt decided that it's going to secure, even with minimal sovereignty over Sinai, which it had lost in 1967, and made a separate so-called deal with Israel. They call it peace, but it's far from being a peace, because peace has different requirements. But it was basically a separate deal in which Egypt was taken out of the equation of the Arab powers and basically neutralized for in exchange for having nominal ownership or return of the Sinai with no sovereignty, because Egypt cannot even enter more than 30 tanks or any kind of forces without Israel's agreement. So Israel created a buffer state, a buffer area, which is about 2.5 times the size of Palestine in Sinai, so that it can take Egypt out of the equation. Once Egypt was taken off the equation, Israel concentrated its efforts into colonizing all of Palestine, and it never had any intent of having any kind of peace agreement, because the Palestinian Authority, which had agreed back in 1974 on basically what is called today the two-state solution, Israel never actually agreed to that formula because it had no intention to establish any kind of Palestinian state. And it had started a colonization, a settler colonialist movement in Palestine, where today we see from the Oslo, the number went from 125,000 into today over 750,000. So it never really had any intention of giving any land back to Palestine, to Palestinians. And the Palestinians gambled. I'm talking about the Palestinian Authority, not the Palestinian people. And the leadership of the Palestinian Authority gambled on this, and they lost. They lost big. So there is no more two-state solution. And we saw this in the so-called steal or deal of the century by Trump, in which all the different parameters of establishing a two-state solution has been wiped out. All the final status issues, the 5 status issues, he has already given the Israelis all what they asked for, so there will never be any kind of two-state solution. And the one-state solution, of course, Israel would never agree to it because it would be the end of Zionism. So what we're left with was an apartheid-type state, even if the Israelis wouldn't call it that, but in effect, that's what it is. And the same thing that when we had the 10 Bantustans in South Africa during the apartheid regime, that's what they want to have. Basically, townships for Palestinians to maybe they can handle their own affairs, but there is actually no sovereignty, no state, and no real rights, political rights for Palestinians living in dignity or in their own country. Well, that left a problem, and that problem is the legitimization of this order that Israel is trying to create and impose. Now, the Arabs, having given up on Palestine because of their weakness, ineptitude, as well as for their own sake and interest, I'm talking here about the Arab leaders, they came with an idea back in 2002 by, at the time, was Crown Prince Abdullah of Saudi Arabia. They said to Israel, listen, all right, we are going to give you the legitimacy, the recognition that you seek, but in return, you need to withdraw from the Palestinian territories that you occupied in 1967, and that would be the deal, something that the whole world actually was supporting, even the United States through different administrations, at least nominally, at least rhetorically, that's what they were calling for. Yet the Israelis rejected that and said there is no land for peace. That formula was called land for peace. And peace here meant normalization. And Netanyahu and his cohorts, his ilk, were saying what we're going to give is peace for peace. In other words, you have to give us legitimacy, recognition that this is the Jewish state. You have to adhere to all our conditions, that there will be no sovereignty, that there will be no Palestinian state, and you have to recognize us, and in return, we will not attack you, so to speak. And the Arabs, unfortunately, because of their own interests, which has nothing to do with Palestine, which has nothing to do with Jerusalem, which has nothing to do with Al-Aqsa, which has nothing to do with history or culture, which has nothing to do with the whole region. These are the leaders that they seek simply to secure their own rules. That's what this is about. They don't want to lose what they have, and they think of themselves as being so weak and that they need protection, especially when they think that there are other forces, there are other powers in the region that have been asserting their power because they are more representative of their populations and because they have other calculations when it comes to their interests. They do not ally themselves with the West. And here specifically, I'm talking about Iran and Turkey. These are two regimes that have been more representative of their people, and they have been marching towards asserting their own identity, their own power and influence and interest aside from the great powers. They, even though it goes back and forth, they have been asserting that kind of identity and that kind of power and influence. But these regimes who are not representative of their own people, they thought that we need protection, and they were seeking American protection. But after they saw what happened to Mubarak, when the Americans let him fall, because there was a different kind of calculation when the army, the Egyptian army, also had a different kind of calculation, those regimes became more aggressive, and they wanted to seek now and appease Israel so that Israel can intervene on their behalf to the United States and secure their rules. And that's even though some of these regimes had relationships with the Zionist entity that goes back to the 60s, like Morocco, for example, or even to the 70s and 80s with some of these Gulf states. And they have been cementing these kind of relationships in more way than another, in commerce, in sports activities, in security, in weapons sales, in diplomatic covers, in visits, secret visits, and so on and so forth. And what we saw lately was being what was in secret is becoming more into the open. And part of it, of course, is to give Trump, who is in trouble in his own country because of the deterioration of the economy and the pandemic, that they wanted to give him a boost. But I don't think it's going to make a difference anyway. But that's not the only reason. The reason here is that we are seeing the beginning of a new alliance in the area. What we have here is three different coalitions being formed. One coalition, which is basically headed by the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Israel, is to make sure that any sense or any change of the Arab order towards more democratization or representative governments or any kinds of reform that will assert the power of people will never see the light of day. And we've seen this in Yemen, we've seen it in Libya, how they have been intervening to the detriment of the suffering of the people of the area, how they have been supporting dictatorships and military regimes so that the people will never be able to assert themselves. And Israel has been helping from the sidelines, from behind, as well as with lobbying the American administration to make sure that these authoritarian regimes will stay in power and will rule the day. On the other hand, we see Iran that is obviously under tremendous pressure by the United States because of its nuclear program, which really, even if it's true, and obviously even many Americans think that that program came under control, it doesn't threaten America. At best, it's trying to come to parity with Israel. Israel has anywhere between 200 and 400 nuclear weapons. At any rate, Iran also has its own project, indeed, in the area. At least what they profess to be is to support what they call the resistance front, whether in Lebanon or in the occupied territories. And they always try to challenge the primacy of Israel and the primacy of the United States in the region. And with that, they're client states. But keep in mind that in terms of actual attacks, Iran never attacked anybody. It was attacked by Iraq, and all these regimes were supporting Iraq at the time. But that doesn't mean that the building or the build-up of Iranian power could not eventually threaten these regimes, even though Iran and the Arabs have lived in this area for thousands of years, and they should find a way to accommodate each other. But those regimes who do not trust their own people, do not think that they can actually defend themselves, because at the end, for them to be able to come to terms with their neighbors, that means they have to be truly representative of their own people, whom they are not. And then we have a third alliance or a third coalition, which is Turkey and other regimes such as the Wifaq in Libya and Qatar and others, in which these people also would like to assert their own power, their own interest, and have a different way of looking at the problems. Turkey is different. Turkey today is different from the Turkey of 20, 25 years ago. 25, 30 years ago, Turkey was basically a client state for NATO. And for the past 20 years or so, it has been trying to break out of this formula and assert its own power in its own region and secure its own interest and go back to its roots. Turkey is not particularly adopting an Islamic discourse, but it is adopting a discourse that is that does not see Islam as an enemy. In fact, it sees Islam as the vehicle by which it can assert its identity, and at the same time trying to establish its own power by adopting new policies that will get its industry and its economy and its technology in a course that can eventually develop into a regional power. And indeed it has, and because of that, it became a threat. And the Turkish model also is a threat, because the Turkish model, regardless of how we look at the leadership, the political leadership, the fact of the matter is all the political leaders of Turkey came through elections. They came through representation. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, sometimes they win big, sometimes they win small. But that model is a threat to these regimes who don't even consider elections, who don't care about elections or representation, who think that they are a blessing to their own people, and that if they give their people anything, it's a privilege that they bestow on them. It's a completely different mindset. It's a completely different. It's a different system that they seek, and therefore they cannot live with such a model, because that model could eventually tell their people that we need to emulate this. We need to be like them. Why can't I have a say in how I'm being ruled? Why I'm always being told what to do? And that's the essence of a dictatorship, the essence of authoritarian regime. So these regimes think that by allying themselves with Israel and the United States, that they can bring down revolutionary Iran, that they can bring down assertive Turkey, that they can bring down any sense of any sense of democratic rule or representation, and hell with the Palestinians. They don't care about the Palestinians, because to them, their own rule, securing their own rule and status and privilege and wealth is what matters. You know, they could care less about anything else. And unfortunately also, the regime in the United Arab Emirates, unlike the previous one, his father, who had even though he was authoritarian, but he had a different kind of value system. He saw in himself as someone who is proud to be part of an Arab Islamic order. He helped the Palestinians. He stood for their rights. But what we see today is somebody who is completely sold out in terms of what it means to be dignified Arab or to have a cause, and who doesn't even recognize what Israel represents. If they think that Israel somehow is going to give them milk and honey and is going to secure them, they are badly mistaken, because that means they do not understand anything about the nature of the Zionist entity or what kind of goals and strategic imperatives it lives under. And just ask some of the African countries, how they have been milked, and they didn't get much in return. When Sadat went to Jerusalem in 1977 and eventually signed the Camp David Accord in 1978 and subsequently the peace treaty in 1979, Egyptians were promised the world. They were promised how things will change, how would they live in the most beautiful economic situation, how every Egyptian would have a nice house and a nice car and a nice job, and how the whole country would be transformed. I remember it was the year that I got married, and there I exchanged $1,000 for 700 pounds. Today, $1,000 is 17,000 pounds. That the dilution of the Egyptian currency of 25 times. Today, the Egyptian currency is 4% of its value back before the peace treaty. So there is no way that Israel is going to deliver anything. In fact, it will say you are mismanaging. But the reason we have mismanagement is because Israel has become part and parcel of every decision that has been decided or is being decided in the Arab world. Every Arab today, from Morocco to Oman, whenever they do anything, say anything, they take into consideration what the US and Israel is going to say or do about it. And that's not a life that the Arabs need to live. That every part of their life is being controlled. And unless we become free, that we cannot live in a decent life, a dignified life. And you cannot become free without freeing yourself from Israeli hegemony and control. And what this treaty does, basically, is to cement that hegemony and control of Israel over the Arab order. Now, Netanyahu is promising that not only the Emirates would sign with a peace treaty, so-called peace. I don't know what peace is, because they never had a war. So I don't know what kind of peace. They don't have borders. They never fought against them. So it is what it is. It's an openly building an alliance with Israel, even though Israel today has been saying loudly that it will never allow the Palestinians to be free. It will never withdraw from any inch of Palestinian land. It will never allow a single Palestinian from coming back to Palestine. It has asserted itself of total sovereignty over Jerusalem, that it will only allow good Muslims to come and pray at Al-Aqsa, and then they have to go back. And that Al-Aqsa, actually, the plans of Al-Aqsa is to be divided into different days for Jews and Muslims, and it's a complete submission, and it's a complete betrayal of everything that the Arabs have been saying that they wouldn't accept, and they don't care. I mean, they simply don't care. Now Netanyahu is saying that not only the Emirates, but other regimes, and people are saying the Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and Oman and Mauritania and Sudan and Morocco and God knows what else they are thinking. And the only way, and let me conclude here, and the only way we can resist this kind of a total abdication, total control and hegemony of Israel over the Arab world and the Arab order is for people to start rising up, for people to start asserting their own power, for people to reject this. Sometimes we are going to do it silently, but we can also do it openly by challenging such policies and such dictatorships. And here I want to say that an example like the BDS movement. The BDS movement is a movement that started with with Palestinian civil society organizations, and now it has become a worldwide movement. So if Israel actually and Israelis start going to different Arab capitals, the people have to say to show their disdain, to show their rejection of such people, that Israel is a legitimate state. Israel is a state that stole land from the Palestinians, and the Palestinians are our brothers, and they are our co-religionists, that the Palestinians are us, and we are the Palestinians. The Palestinians are at the vanguard of this struggle. If they are abandoned today, believe me, they will never stop resisting. But if the Israelis were capable of finishing every Palestinian on earth, there will be other people who would come and become victims of Zionism, and they still have to resist. So they're better off aiding actually the Palestinians so that they don't have to resist and fight the Israelis tomorrow. And when I say that, we need to establish basically for this a worldwide movement to stop this called normalization process, whether it's done through the Emirates or other countries and other regimes. Israel is not a legitimate state, and for some Arab leaders to legitimize it does not make it legitimate. We are going to go through some tough times in the near future, but these tough times are a must when people have to stand up to oppression and repression. I don't want to just show a bleak picture, because we can also cite many successes. When people stand up, there is a strength in people power. We saw this during the apartheid regime era in the 80s, when it eventually collapsed. We saw this during the communist regimes, when people stood up, and even though there were sacrifices, they were able to win over the dictatorships and military regimes. And Israel is no exception. It has its own vulnerabilities, its own weaknesses, and I'm sure when people stand up, eventually they can win over. In conclusion, I just want to say that indeed the agreement between the United Arab Emirates and Israel is not new, or it wasn't unexpected, because we knew about many of the dealings that were done in secret. We've seen the Egyptian-Israeli, we've seen the Oslo between the Palestinians and the Israelis, we've seen the Jordanians and the Israelis. Always the Israelis come on top, and always the other side are the losers. And this is not going to be any difference here. The Israelis will try to exploit every part of this agreement. They will extort billions of dollars from the Emiratis. They will penetrate their societies. They will corrupt their societies. Eventually, the people will wake up, but after much damage was done. And when they wake up, they will, the tide will be turned, and Israel will have to face a reckoning one day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sami and Dr. Burhan. Both of you made an important point that this agreement is about leaders securing their own rule, securing their own regimes, the timing of this historic decision, and that these regimes are not representative of their own people. Dr. Sami, you recommended that people worldwide need to speak up, and there is some good news I have seen in social media in the last few days. Activists in the BDS campaign saying to now extend this to the United Arab Emirates, that if they are going to collaborate with Israel, then they can share and collaborate in that boycott as well. I have seen people divesting and closing their businesses, ending publication agreements, making arrangements to relocate. And so I think that there will be some fallout. It's hard to measure such things, and not everybody publicizes it, but certainly within social media already people are boycotting the Emirates because of this. Dr. Burhan, a question that we were discussing with our producer, who's heard this question raised before. This last week, President Erdogan, in response to this UAE-Israeli agreement, he authorized the foreign minister to recall Turkey's ambassador to the UAE and to end diplomatic relations. If President Erdogan is willing to take this step, one question that's been raised is why doesn't Turkey do more to end its own diplomatic relationship with Israel?
Actually, Erdogan said either recall or maybe frozen the relations with the Emirates, not just of this last event. Of course, this is let's say, dramatic decision from the Emirates. But of course, there are other positions against Turkey. Either even in what happened in Libya, they have used their weapons and even air strikes against Turkey. But also about Turkish-Israeli relations. Yeah, we have reduced our relations through any decisions that has taken or any action that has been taken by the Israelis. We have reduced our relations to the just consulate level, and also Turkey refused every Israeli action, for example, taking Jerusalem as the capital, and also. But the Turkish position, of course, it has been relations started in early 50s, but through these relations, especially in the Erdogan's time, it was very critical, and from time to time it come to almost end. And what happened in 1 minute issue in Europe, and also Turkey also tries, although there is relations, but Turkey tries to push Israel and Zionist, occupation again backward, and use this kind of even in a way diplomatic relations to avoid any Israeli action. But if we compare it with the new action from Emirates, they as if they are ready to, as Professor Al-Arian mentioned, they don't have any conflict actually. Why searching for peace? And peace for what? Turkey's position supporting the Palestinian issue everywhere, in every place. So that's issue. In terms of relations, now there are relations in a very bad position, but still Turkey thinks that through these relations, Turkey has a kind of power to make a pressure on Israel. If any Arab country thinks that they can make pressure on Israel, they are ready to talk to them, but they talk to them as if they are, accepting the last issue, for example, the Palestinian issue, last position, and they are supporting the Netanyahu's, positions. By the way, at the same time, in contrary, Erdogan, in every speech of him, criticized. But of course, this is another decision. If maybe they may, in long term, they can take a decision also cutting the relations with Israel. But now it is as if it is already, in a very minor situation, Turkish and Israeli relations actually. And also from the other side, Turkey is supporting Palestine fully, in everywhere, in every manner. In every, for example, opportunity, Turkey supports. By the way, we know that Emirates and Saudi Arabia, they already cut their help to Palestine. They want Palestine to accept the deal with Israel, and they try to also, persuade Palestine to accept the situation. At the same time, Turkey, supports and say them, we are with you. Please don't give away. That's the maybe difference between Turkish and Emirate positions. Actually, this is my opinion.
Dr. Sami, any insights on the same question in terms of Turkish relations with Israel? How Erdogan authorizing changing relations with the Emirates. Do you see Turkey doing anything to change its relationship formally with Israel?
Well, I think any observer into the relationship between Turkey and Israel and the Gulf states and Israel, we have to go back and try to analyze it and look at it. So let's go back 20, 25 years ago. What was the relationship between Turkey and Israel? They were having military exercises together. They were having an exchange of security cooperation. They were selling weapons to each other. And the Arabs at the time supposedly were having boycott against Israel, and they were threatening Israel that they would never be normalizing any kind of relations unless they withdraw from Palestinian lands and establish peace with the Palestinians. And of course, I'm not here to judge. I'm just here to observe and to lay the facts, and then I will give my judgment. So the Palestinians, of course, they committed their historical mistakes, by going through Oslo without any kind of guaranteed agreement that there will be a settlement at hand. The only concession that the Israelis gave, that they recognized the PLO as being the negotiator on behalf of the Palestinians, but they didn't promise a state, they didn't promise withdrawal, they didn't promise anything to the Palestinians. All were part of so-called final status issues. Now, move forward, the Arab, after 10 years of fruitless negotiations, the Arabs came with a scheme, with a plan. They call it the peace plan, and supposedly this was the Arab position as a whole. They forgot about the 1948 territories. They forgot completely about the Palestinians, the 6-7 million Palestinians who have been exiled and their descendants. And they told the Israelis, listen, you want relationship with us, you want peace with us, this is what you're supposed to do. And they gave them the parameters by which is basically withdrawal from the 1967 territories. Now that became an international position, and Turkey is part of that position. But Turkey, in the past 20 years, have moved away from that relationship. Turkey wasn't just a friend to Israel, but it was a pillar of US policy in the region. Now, since then, it has walked away from that relationship and trying to assert its own power to become more independent. I cannot say that it became completely independent because of many considerations, but certainly Turkey today is the same Turkey that was 20, 25 years ago. And with that also, it has shown more grace to the Palestinian cause that Turkish government back then, even the Turks were with this time, the governments were different. Now we're talking about something that has become coalescing more, the government and the people, but they haven't become the country which, or they think they can cut relationship with Israel, walk away from that and become more hostile to it, because they think if they do that, there will be more pressure on them that will destabilize the whole country. Now we cannot compare that to countries where supposedly they didn't have any relationship, and instead of standing firm to the issue that we will not give you any kind of an inroad into the Arab world, any kind of recognition or legitimacy unless you pay the price, which is basically the two-state solution. We saw these regimes going to the Israelis, totally bypassing the Palestinians. In fact, in some instances where, and the Israelis say, when the Israelis were aggressing and having wars against the Palestinians or the Lebanese in 2006, 8, 9, 12, and 14, these people were encouraging them to the Palestinians. They were going to the Israelis and offering, giving them which to Israelis were incentives that they didn't have to give them any inch to the Palestinians. Why should they? If the price of withdrawal was a warm relationship with these regimes, we're getting this anyways. Why should I give up anything? I will not put my thumb on the Palestinians until they say uncle, until they cry uncle, because I don't have to give up anything. I have the power. Regimes have basically gave the internally the left in Israel, because the right has always been saying we don't have to give up anything. The Arabs are in the palm of our hand, and that's basically what these regimes have allowed. Now, So we have, on one instance, a Turkish government that was in bed with the Israelis, walking away, and we have Arabs who are supposedly not having any kind of relationship, and these are completely two different relationships, completely two different positions. Now, that, you know, I'm not comparing that to Iran, where Iran says, I don't recognize Israel. Israel is a legitimate state, and people say this or that. That's a completely different, because we're talking about a revolutionary country that they listen to the Palestinians openly. That's different. That's not what I'm trying to compare these two. Now, my judgment is that the Turkish people, you know, if the government has certain constraints because of different considerations that have to do with the economy, that has to do with different geopolitical calculations and the region's policy and their position in Syria and different issues, certainly the Turkish people can do more. You know, we have to reduce, for example, the trade that takes place today between Turkey and Israel. Turkey today is the largest trading partner. By the way, I tried to inquire about this, and the government says they're not part of this, and they do not care. The government doesn't care if Turkish merchants and Turkish traders and business people go and find and refuse to trade with Israel and go and find other products from different places. They would, and of course they could do that. But as I said, if I have a criticism, that would be one of my first criticisms. But certainly the Turkish civil society formed and educated, because their heart is with Palestine. I saw this firsthand when we went to the streets after Trump declared Jerusalem as being the capital of Israel. That Turks were in the streets by the millions. But they need to be. They didn't know. They come and tell them, during Ramadan, eat this Palestinian dates. They don't know that this is, Israeli dates. They think they are helping Palestinians by buying these dates, while these dates are actually Israeli. So there are all kinds of tricks. So we need to start acting, as civil society in this country to inform the Turkish public, what they need to do. They can bring this trade to zero, but that has to have all kinds of different actions. But I believe, I don't think that the government is going to come and crack down. And of course, Professor Burhan also mentioned the fact that while many countries have been walking away from helping the Palestinians, Turkey has been the #1 so far in the past 20 years of helping the Palestinians in terms of many kind of assistance, particularly student scholarships, housing, medical facilities, building hospitals, giving all kinds of support to the Palestinians. But of course they can do better. But I want to try to say is that one country is coming closer, the others are pulling back, and even boycotting, official Palestinian delegations who are supposedly negotiating with Israelis according to the Arab peace plan. They have been cut off. All 8 have been cut off with them, and others, they have been spying on them and working for the Israelis. And that's the huge incentive that Israelis have. They don't have to give up anything because the Arabs are coming to them in droves.
Thank you, Dr. Sami. I have another question about the independence of the Emirates. You made a reference to the current leader of the Emirates' father. For those listeners or those who listen in the future that might not be familiar with United Arab Emirates history, it's never been in charge really of its own defense, going all the way back to 1819 when the British took over from the Portuguese. The British were very strict against the tribes and told them, you cannot have boats, you cannot build reinforcements along the coast, you cannot build this, you can't talk to other countries, don't even communicate with other countries, everything must go through London, and in return the British will protect you, will be your defense and insurance. And this lasted for a very, very long time. Take this relationship all the way up to 1965, when London didn't like the current sheikh, and so they overthrew him, and this was Sheikh Shakbut, and they supported the current leader's father. This was Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan. They supported Al Nahyan in a coup to overthrow the brother. And the pretext that they used was that the brother was stagnant and was hindering oil extraction projects, and they needed a more flexible ruler to help, and that this was necessary to protect the region from leftist groups. Again, this was the proxy wars you mentioned of the 60s, going back to the Cold War, of we need to remove this leader because he supports Nasser. We need to remove this leader because he's talking to the Soviets. The point is, in 1965, the British supported a coup, and they removed the ruler of Sharjah. And then the next year, in 1966, they removed the leader and replaced him with basically the ruling family as we know it now. So with that as a background, my question is, how independent is the Emirates really in making any foreign policy decisions? Because with this history, they know if they don't follow the cues of the West, within its own history, very recently, our brothers being removed, and they know that the West will find a cousin or a brother that will replace them. How independent is the Emirates really?
Well, let me pitch in. As in any colonial power, the colonial power obviously has its own policies, but sometimes the one who is being colonized will make policies that will even surprise the colonizer. I don't think the United States has been certainly encouraging these leaders to have overtures with Israelis for a long time. And I believe that this administration is no different, and probably Kushner has been pushing them for so long. But they go beyond niceties. You know, some regimes may have to do certain things to appease the Americans by, you know, having an Israeli athletic team visiting their country, or having, you know, some kind of a commercial delegation and things like that, so that there will be a sort of a normalization, you know, even at just to see something. But these rulers, some of these regimes, go out of their hand to actually establish a much more cooperation as military alliances, and they want to invest billions of dollars in the economies of this, and they conspire, and sometimes they conspire to have people assassinated, you know, Palestinians and others assassinated in their own countries by Israeli Mossad hit teams, so that they can appease them. I mean, these are completely different people. And then they go and try to sell this to their own people through their own media. I mean, yesterday, Sky News, which is, you know, basically owned and operated by the same regime, they have been trying to sell this to the Emirati people and to the Arab world as being totally acceptable and normal. And they want to brainwash the people to normalize this kind of behavior and action without anything in return. I mean, we have to keep in mind that what they think they could do is they can ally themselves with Israel and the United States so that they can thwart their own enemies, whether it's Iran or political Islam or Turkey or whatever they think their enemies are, and sometimes their own people. But they will be badly mistaken, because the United States does not, and Israel, they do not fight on behalf of others. They go for their own interests, and they want, the whole point is to legitimize Israel, is to make sure that Israel will survive, and that not only will survive but will thrive, and it will become the regional hegemon. What does it mean to be a regional hegemon? A lot of people do not understand. It means that every decision, every major decision in the area cannot pass, cannot become true unless Israel renders it so, unless Israel accepts it. That means our lives, political, social, economic, every aspect of our life would be controlled by Israel. If people want that, and of course to do that, then Israel will give certain privileges to certain classes.
Dr. Burhan, do you have any, as we're waiting to hear Dr. Sami, do you have any additional comments based on my question and Dr. Sami's answers?
Yeah. Actually, of course, whatever Dr. Sami said is true. Also, and from my point, also, I'm from trying to, of course, follow the Emirates media, and even some from time to time, I was also contributing to in their programs. What I have seen, for example, there is something you can easily see. For example, issues related to, for example, a conflict between Turkey and Europe. You can see them; they are totally in the side of Europe. Now, it's understand. For example, in the Eastern Mediterranean, we are talking about the rights of the people in the Eastern Mediterranean, including the Egyptians, Turks, and Syrians, Lebanese, whatever. Because Turkey was defending the issue of that resources in the Eastern Mediterranean should be shared in a just way. You see a lot of contributors from the Emirates side. They are defending the European side. They say, okay, French has right, of course. The French is not in the Eastern Mediterranean. They support Greece right. They are also not in the Eastern Mediterranean. They are in the Asian side. So this kind of something, a kind of falling in love with the killer, because these colonial powers, they of course they colonized everywhere, Africa and Arab countries. And we know the most of the even oil that has come out of this area should go to the Western powers, either through the companies or through the goods or through some properties they should have to buy from the European countries. This is something, we know it is not written, but everybody know that they believe that their, power is related directly to the Western powers. This is a kind of psychology they have. Sometimes they feel, for example, when they talk to them, recently there was a discussion in one of the channels in Sky News in Arabia, and there was an Arab person. He said, you were colonized Turkey for the last 400 years. I said, okay, I'm talking to you in Arabic. You don't know any Turkish, but you are ready to speak English, French, whatever, and very happily. How come a country colonizes another country and learns their language and, of course, preserve the culture and defend this culture, and you are ready to accept anything from Europe and just, so that is the psychology in some, of course, I don't mean everybody, but especially some leading figures. You can easily see that they are saying, for example, the issue of, for example, if you talk about anything about the Palestinian issue, he said this is Arab issue. This is not, of course, not Arab issue. It's a Muslim Islamic issue. But now the last decision, they are ready to sell even the Palestinian issue just to gain some credit from the Western powers. This psychology is very clear. So I think this is what the possible, or let's say, capacity of the Arab Spring and Arab uprising would change, and because of that, they are defending this position and try to do whatever they can to avoid any kind of democratic environment which can, of course, throw them away of their authorities. And of course, this maybe just explains their mentality. Yeah.
Absolutely. And in Turkey, we see this, and this was highlighted by one of our researchers in identifying articles in our weekly Geopolitical Compass, our weekly publication. One of our researchers identified that the Emirates has promoted fake experts and fake journalists that have been quoted in right-wing Western media. The anti-Turkey tone is very strong, and we see that here in Turkey. Every morning when I wake up, I check numerous newspapers, and it's like Chicken Little. The sky is falling. The sky is falling. The lira is going to burn in your hand. Run away from Turkey. It's all doom and gloom. and they forget that Turkey is the only nation, one of two nations that posted growth in the first quarter of this year and has record sales even during a pandemic. They ignore the facts, certainly. Dr. Sami, in his passion, has partially broken the internet. He's back. Dr. Sami, do you have any final remarks as we conclude?
I'd like to say one thing, that governments and leaders change. 30, 40 years ago, Turkey and Iran were, many our governments were nemesis to Israel. Today, Israel are thorns in the side of Israel. So I think whatever regimes decide to do, these are not popular decisions. These are decisions taken by leaders, either because of whatever reasons or miscalculations, or because they don't see the strength in their people. And I think these would change. And I think Israel is largely rejected by peoples in the region, and that we should not despair that these kind of policies are not going to last. We saw during the Arab Spring in Egypt, for example, after over 30 years of so-called peace, what happened there is that the Egyptian people, when they had their freedom, they rejected Israel, they tore its flag, they occupied its embassy, and they kicked out the ambassador. And I think eventually that's what's going to happen throughout. So if some leaders today, alliances, this eventually would be cast aside, would be rejected, and the only solution to the Palestinian situation is not to have any kind of legitimacy or to bestow any kind of legitimacy on Israel. It is actually to back this mentality and the Zionist entity.
Thank you, Dr. Sami. Thank you, Dr. Burhan, for your time this evening, and for everybody joining us on behalf of Center for Islam and Global Affairs. Thank you for joining us. Please do visit our website, and also look forward to our weekly publication, the Geopolitical Compass, where we summarize and brief numerous articles sensitive to geopolitical issues around the world. Thank you again for your time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Have a good evening. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us. Assalamu alaikum.